They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but here in London in the dead of December, I prefer to serve it at -5 degrees, accompanied by a blistering snowstorm and a legally binding eviction notice. Look at them, just look at them. I am standing in the shadows of the drawing room, holding a silver tray of canapés like the good little servant they trained me to be. Over by the fireplace, my husband James is popping a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon. Listen to that laughter. It is the sound of victory, or so they think. 10 minutes ago, they finally broke me, or rather, they thought they did. James slid the divorce papers across the mahogany table and told me to sign. He said I was a burden. He said he needed a wife who could help him buy this townhouse, not a charity case who scrubs the floors. His mother, sitting on the sofa I paid for, told me to pack my bags and be gone before the snow settles. They are celebrating because they think they are finally free of me. They are celebrating because they believe that tomorrow, James' rich mistress will step in and buy this £5 million Kensington estate for them. The irony is so delicious, I can almost taste it on my tongue, sweeter than that champagne they are wasting. You see, they are terrified because the landlord is coming to inspect the property tonight. They are running around, hiding their mess, desperate to impress the owner. They do not know that the owner is already in the room. They do not know that the pen I just used to sign away our marriage is the same pen I used to sign the deeds to my company. Kensington Holdings. My company. My house. My rules. I'm looking at the grandfather clock. 2 minutes. In exactly 2 minutes, the doorbell will ring and my lawyer will walk in. I will not just reveal the truth. I will strip them of everything. Their pride, their home, their fake status. They wanted a clean break? Oh, I will give them a break so clean it will leave them freezing on the pavement. Do you want to see the moment their world collapses? Do you want to watch the most satisfying eviction in history? Comment the number 1 right now. Trust me, you do not want to miss what happens when the clock strikes 6. Part 1. The Illusion. Welcome to number 42, Kensington Park Gardens. If you were to walk past the wrought iron gates and look up at the white stucco facade, you would think this is the home of a perfect, established British family. You would see the perfectly trimmed hedges, the heavy oak door painted in a glossy midnight blue, and the warm glow of the chandelier spilling out onto the street. It looks like old money. It smells like heritage. It feels like success. But you know what they say about appearances? They are the most expensive lies we tell. Living here for the past 3 years has been like living inside a meticulously curated museum exhibit, where I am both the curator and the janitor, but mostly the janitor. The air inside this house is always thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the underlying stench of desperation. Take my mother-in-law, Mrs. Pembroke, or as she demands the staff call her, Madam. She spends 3 hours every morning in front of the vanity mirror in her bedroom, not just applying layers of expensive cream to her aging neck, but practicing her vowels. Yes, you heard me correctly. She practices speaking. I can hear her from the hallway as I carry the heavy laundry baskets up the stairs. She repeats words like bath, glass, and grass, stretching the vowels until they sound sufficiently aristocratic. She is terrified of her own accent slipping. She is terrified that someone might discover she grew up above a chip shop in Leeds, not in a manor house in the Cotswolds. She thinks that if she sounds posh enough, the world will forget that her bank account is constantly overdrawn. Just this morning, the performance reached a new height of absurdity. I was in the drawing room, preparing to vacuum the main rug before the guests arrived. It is a magnificent piece, a hand-knotted Persian silk rug from the 17th century. The colours are deep crimsons and royal blues, woven together in a pattern that tells the story of an ancient empire. I plugged in the Dyson, and the moment the motor whirred to life, she came screaming down the stairs in her silk dressing gown, looking like a banshee in boudoir attire. "Sarah, stop it this instant!" she shrieked, clutching her chest as if I had just taken a knife to a Rembrandt painting. I switched off the machine. I asked her what was wrong. She looked at me with that familiar mix of pity and disgust, the kind one reserves for a stray dog that has wandered into a cathedral. "You stupid girl," she hissed, walking over to inspect the rug with a magnifying glass she keeps in her pocket for dramatic effect. "You do not use a mechanical vacuum on an antique of this calibre. This rug has been in the Pembroke family for generations. It requires a gentle touch. It requires respect." I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted iron. The Pembroke family? Generations? I bought that rug at a Sotheby's auction 4 years ago. It cost me £45,000. I had it shipped here and placed in the drawing room a week after James and I moved in, telling them I found it at a vintage market for a bargain. They believed me because they know nothing about quality, only about price tags. And now she was claiming it as her ancestral heritage. "Get a bucket of warm water and a sponge," she commanded, pointing a manicured finger at the floor. "Hand scrub it, inch by inch, and do not use too much water or you will rot the fibres." So, that is how I spent my morning. While Mrs. Pembroke sat in the velvet armchair not 5 feet away, sipping Earl Grey tea and flipping through Tackler magazine, I was on my hands and knees. The water in the bucket turned grey and cold. My knees burned against the hard floor beneath the thin silk. My hands, once soft and capable of signing multi-million-pound contracts, were red, raw and chapped. The smell of lemon polish stung my nose. Every few minutes, she would look over the top of her magazine, not to check on my progress, but to correct my posture. "Keep your back straight, Sarah," she would say, her voice dripping with that fake, practiced elegance. "You look like a scullery maid. Honestly, James could have done so much better. Tiffany would never let herself look so dishevelled." Tiffany. The name hung in the air like a bad smell. Even while I was scrubbing the dirt from under her feet, she could not resist reminding me of my replacement. She talked about Tiffany's father, a man who owns half of Canary Wharf. She talked about how Tiffany has such grace, such style, such money. I kept scrubbing, circular motions left to right. Rhythm is the only thing that keeps the rage from boiling over. She stood up, walking past me, deliberately stepping on the section I had just cleaned with her muddy gardening shoes. She did not apologize. She did not even notice. To her, I am not a person. I am just another appliance in this house, only less valuable than the toaster, because the toaster actually works on electricity, whereas I require food and space. She paused at the door, turning back with a sneer. "Make sure it is spotless, Sarah. The landlord is a very particular person. We must show them that this house is occupied by people of quality, not slatterns." I looked up at her, my hands dripping with dirty water. I forced a smile, a weak, subservient smile that I have perfected over the years. "Of course, Mother," I whispered. "I will make sure the landlord sees exactly who is living here." She nodded, satisfied with my submission, and swept out of the room, leaving me alone with the silence, the cold water, and the rug that belongs to me. I looked down at the intricate patterns of the silk. It really is a beautiful rug. It is a shame I will have to burn it after they leave. I do not think I can ever get the stain of their hypocrisy out of the fabric. I know what you are thinking. You are wondering why a woman who owns half of Kensington would willingly scrub floors for a man who treats her like a doormat. You are wondering why I ever married James Pembroke in the first place. It is a fair question. To answer it, I have to take you back 3 years, before the divorce papers, before the insults, before I became invisible. I was born into a world where price tags did not exist. My father built Kensington Holdings from the ground up. I grew up in boarding schools where the uniforms cost more than most people's cars. I spent my summers in Tuscany and my winters in the Swiss Alps. But there is a peculiar loneliness that comes with that kind of wealth. You never know who loves you. Do they love your laugh, or do they love the fact that your father can fund their startup? Do they want to hold your hand, or do they want to hold the keys to your Bentley? By the time I was 22, I was exhausted. I was tired of the fake smiles, the gold diggers, the men who looked at me and saw a bank vault instead of a human being. So I created a test. When I met James, I was not Sarah the heiress. I was just Sarah. I was working as an archivist in a dusty little library, a job I took simply because I loved the smell of old paper. We met in a pub in Shoreditch. It was raining, typical London weather, and I had forgotten my umbrella. I was shivering, looking like a drowned rat, trying to order a tea. James was there. He was wearing a cheap suit that was slightly too big for him, but he had a smile that seemed to light up the gloomy room. He offered me his jacket. He bought me my tea. He sat with me for 3 hours and listened to me talk about Victorian literature. He did not ask about my family. He did not glance at my watch to see if it was a Rolex. He just looked at me. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. He was charming. He was ambitious, yes, but he seemed kind. He told me he wanted to be a successful architect, that he wanted to build homes for families, not just houses for investors. I fell in love with that vision. I fell in love with the idea that we could build something together, starting from nothing. When he proposed a year later, I made the most fatal decision of my life. I was sitting in my father's office, the real one, with the mahogany desk and the view of the Shard. My father's solicitor, Mr. Sterling, begged me to tell James the truth. "Make him sign a prenuptial agreement, Sarah," Mr. Sterling had warned, his voice grave. "Protect your assets. If he loves you, he will not care." But I shook my head. "No," I told him. "If I tell him I am worth millions, everything changes. The power dynamic shifts. He will always feel inferior. I want a partnership of equals. I want to know unequivocally that he chooses me for me." So I hid it all. I set up a trust fund that would be inaccessible until I turned 30, or until I chose to activate it. I entered the marriage with nothing but a suitcase of modest clothes and a heart full of hope. I wanted to prove that love was stronger than money. God, I was naive. The cracks did not appear all at once. It was a slow erosion. It started with the subtle comments about my lack of ambition. James would come home frustrated from work, complaining that his colleagues were getting ahead because they had connections. He would look at me, cooking dinner in our small rented flat, and sigh. "If only you had come from a better family, Sarah," he would say, pouring himself a drink. "Maybe you could introduce me to someone useful." Then came the pressure from his mother. When James's career started to stall, the Pembrokes panicked. They needed to maintain the facade of success. They pushed us to rent this townhouse in Kensington, claiming that address is everything in his industry. I begged him not to. I told him we could not afford it on his salary alone. "Don't be such a pessimist," he snapped at me. "My mother says we have to fake it until we make it. And since you bring nothing to the table financially, the least you can do is support my vision." That was the moment the man I met in the pub died. Or perhaps that was the moment the mask finally fell off. The kindness vanished, replaced by resentment. He started blaming me for everything. If we were short on rent, it was because I spent too much on groceries. If he didn't get a promotion, it was because I wasn't a charming enough hostess at his dinner parties. I became the scapegoat for his mediocrity. And the irony? The cruel, twisting irony of it all. The very thing he despises me for, my poverty, is a lie. The connections he is so desperate for, I have them all in my phone contacts. The lifestyle he is killing himself to achieve, I could have given it to him with a snap of my fingers. But he failed the test. Day by day, insult by insult, he failed. I stayed for 3 years. I stayed because I kept hoping the old James would come back. I stayed because I didn't want to admit that my romantic experiment was a catastrophic failure. But tonight, looking at my reflection in the darkened window, I realized something. The James I loved never existed. He was just a reflection of what I wanted to see. "Sarah!" His voice booms from the living room, snapping me out of my memory. "Where is the ice? Tiffany likes her champagne freezing." I close my eyes for a second, taking a deep breath. The sadness is gone now. It has been replaced by a cold, hard clarity. "Coming, James," I reply softly. I walk to the freezer. I grab the ice bucket. He wants ice? Oh, I will give him ice. I will give him a winter so cold he will never feel warm again. It is rarely the single blow that kills a marriage. It is the accumulation of 1,000 tiny cuts, paper cuts, invisible to the naked eye, but stinging with the salt of humiliation every single day. If James was the hammer that broke my heart, his sister Chloe was the needle that picked away at the pieces. Chloe moved in 6 months ago because she needed to find herself. So far, the only thing she has found is my gin collection and the password to my Netflix account. She is 24, calls herself a lifestyle influencer, and treats me not as a sister-in-law, but as a live-in hotel maid. The torment started with small things, items disappearing from my vanity, my moisturizer, my perfume, my lipstick. One morning I walked into the bathroom and saw my jar of La Mer cream sitting on the counter, empty, scraped clean. That jar cost £200. I had saved for 3 months to buy it, a small luxury to remind myself of the life I used to have. I found the empty jar in Chloe's bin. When I confronted her, she was lying on the chaise longue, scrolling through her phone. "Don't be so petty, Sarah," she sighed, not even looking up. It was practically empty anyway. Besides, I needed it for a tutorial. You should be happy I'm helping your boring products get some exposure. Exposure. As if her 300 followers could pay my bills. Then there was the laundry. "Sarah," she would scream from the top of the stairs, "my silk knickers, you put them in the machine again. The label clearly says hand wash only." And like a fool, I apologized. I stood over the sink, plunging my hands into the soapy water, scrubbing the delicate lace underwear of a grown woman who despised me. I washed the stains of her laziness while she sat in the next room watching reality television, laughing at people less fortunate than herself. But I did not scream. I did not throw the wet lace in her face. Instead, I went to my room, pulled out a small black leather notebook from under my mattress, and I wrote it down. November 12th. Chloe. La Mer cream. £200. November 14th. Chloe. Hand washing service. £50. November 20th. James. Dry cleaning bill. £80. I call it the ledger. It is a meticulous record of every penny they owe me, every insult they hurled, every hour of labour they stole. It is the only thing that kept me sane. While they thought I was submitting, I was accounting. But the entry that takes up the most ink, the one that nearly tore the page, was written last month. It was our 3rd wedding anniversary. I had cooked. Roast lamb with rosemary, James's favourite. I had set the table with candles. I had even bought a bottle of red wine that cost more than our weekly grocery budget. 7 o'clock passed, then 8, then 9. The lamb went cold. The candles burned down to puddles of wax. At 10:30, my phone buzzed. It was James. "Sarah," he said, his voice breathless. "I am so sorry. A crisis at the firm. Big merger. I am going to be stuck here all night. Don't wait up." "It is our anniversary, James," I said quietly. There was a pause, a long, heavy silence. "I know," he said, sounding annoyed rather than apologetic. "But someone has to work to pay for that roof over your head, Sarah. Stop being selfish. I'm doing this for us." He hung up. But he forgot to hang up properly. For 3 seconds, before the line went dead, I heard it. Not the sound of an office, not the sound of printers or typing. I heard jazz music. I heard the clinking of crystal glasses. And then I heard a voice. A woman's voice, high-pitched and giggling. "Oh, James, you are so naughty. Tell her you are in a tunnel." It was Tiffany. I sat there in the dark, staring at the cold lamb. I did not cry. I simply opened my black notebook. December 10th. James, anniversary dinner, emotional damages. I wrote a number next to it, a very large number. I closed the book. The pages were full. It was time to stop writing. It was time to start collecting. I wonder, do you have a book like that? A mental list of people who have wronged you? If you have ever kept a score that you are waiting to settle, tap the like button right now. Let me know I am not the only one keeping track. There is a common misconception that the wife is always the last to know. We are painted as oblivious creatures, blindly dusting the photographs on the mantel, while our husbands build secret lives in hotel rooms. But that is insulting to women everywhere. We know. We always know. We notice when the tone of their voice shifts half an octave. We notice when they start taking their phone into the bathroom. We notice when they come home smelling of a perfume that we do not own. For me, it wasn't a lipstick stain on the collar. That is too cinematic, too cliché. James is careful, but he is arrogant, and arrogance makes men sloppy. It started with a receipt. I found it in the pocket of his grey wool trousers while I was preparing them for the dry cleaners. It was from a jeweller on Bond Street, a receipt for a diamond tennis bracelet, £3,000. My heart stopped for a beat, foolishly. For a split second, I thought perhaps he had remembered our anniversary after all. Perhaps this was a surprise gift hidden away for Christmas. But Christmas came and went. I got a food processor. The bracelet never appeared. Most women would have screamed. They would have thrown the receipt in his face and demanded an explanation. But I am not most women. I was raised in a boardroom, not a playground. In business, you never reveal you know the competitor's strategy until you have the leverage to bankrupt them. So I put the receipt back in his pocket, and I began to watch. I became a ghost in my own marriage. While James snored beside me, I unlocked his phone. It was pathetically easy. His passcode was his birthday. Narcissism is a fatal flaw, James. I didn't just look at texts. I looked at bank statements. The Ivy Asia on a Tuesday night. The Ritz for afternoon tea. Uber rides to an address in Mayfair at 2 a.m. And then I found her. Her name was saved in his phone as T, just T. It didn't take long to find the rest. Instagram is a detective's best friend. I searched the location tags of the restaurants James had visited. I scrolled through hundreds of photos until I saw it. There, in the background of a selfie taken by a girl with overly filled lips and hair extensions that cost more than my weekly allowance. There was James's hand. I recognized the signet ring. I bought him that ring. Tiffany, 22 years old, daughter of a property developer who makes cheap high-rises in East London. I spent nights scrolling through her feed. It was a shrine to bad taste and new money. Photos of her posing with designer bags she clearly didn't know how to pronounce. Captions full of spelling errors and emojis. She spells grateful with a great. She was everything I was not. Loud, vapid, young, and stupid. In one video, she was laughing, holding a glass of champagne and saying, "My boyfriend says he is going to leave his boring wife soon. She sounds like such a drag." Boring. I sat in the dark of our bedroom, the blue light of the phone illuminating my face. I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't even sadness anymore. It was clarity. I realized that James didn't want a partner. He wanted an audience. He wanted someone who looked at him with empty-headed adoration. Someone who didn't know that he was a mediocre architect living off his wife's secret fortune. Tiffany was perfect for him. She was a shiny object for a magpie. I began to compile the file. I took screenshots. I downloaded bank statements. I saved the GPS data from his car. I didn't want a shouting match. I wanted a dossier. In the UK, adultery is a valid ground for divorce, but financial misconduct is where you really hurt them. I was building a case to ensure that when I cut him off, he wouldn't just be single, he would be destitute. One night, he came home late. The clock struck 1. He walked into the bedroom trying to be quiet. He smelled of Santal 33 and guilt. "Sarah," he whispered, seeing I was awake. "I didn't mean to wake you. The client meeting ran late. These investors, they just talk and talk." I sat up in bed. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had laid in the arms of a 22-year-old girl 2 hours ago and laughed about how boring I was. I could have ended it right then. I could have told him I knew everything. But the house sale wasn't finalized. The trap wasn't fully set. I needed him to feel safe. I needed him to think he was winning. "It is okay, darling," I said, my voice steady, my face a mask of concern. "You work so hard for us. Go to sleep. I will make you coffee in the morning." He smiled, relieved. He kissed my forehead, a Judas kiss. "You are a good wife, Sarah," he mumbled as he drifted off to sleep. I lay awake, listening to his breathing. "Enjoy your sleep, James, because when you wake up, the nightmare begins. I am not watering the flowers of this marriage anymore. I am watering the weeds, and I am going to let them grow until they choke you." Humanity's something truly grotesque about watching a family plan a murder over a Sunday roast. Not a physical murder, of course. They are too cowardly for blood. But the murder of a marriage, the murder of a person's dignity, that is something they are more than capable of carving up alongside the beef Wellington. It was last Sunday. The air in the dining room was stiflingly hot. I had spent 4 hours in the kitchen preparing the meal. The gravy was rich and dark. The potatoes were roasted in goose fat, exactly how James likes them, and the silver cutlery was polished until it gleamed. But I was not sitting at the table. "Sarah, don't sit down yet," Mrs. Pembroke had said, waving her hand dismissively. "We need more wine, and the salt cellar is empty. Honestly, do I have to think of everything?" So I stood. I stood by the sideboard in my simple black dress, holding a bottle of Merlot, watching them eat the food I cooked, in the house I owned, plotting my destruction. They didn't even lower their voices. To them, I had become part of the furniture, a deaf, dumb waiter with no feelings to hurt. "I spoke to Tiffany's father this morning," James said, slicing into his beef with enthusiasm. He is very keen on the wedding date being set for spring. He wants to announce the engagement in the Times. Spring is perfect, Mrs. Pembroke chimed in, her mouth full. It gives us enough time to settle the housing situation. Has he agreed to the purchase? James took a long sip of wine. He said as soon as the divorce is finalised, he will wire the funds. He wants to buy this place for us outright. A wedding gift for Tiffany. He says a Pembroke shouldn't be paying rent. I gripped the neck of the wine bottle so hard my knuckles turned white. They were selling my house. They were making deals on a property they didn't own, with money they didn't have, to impress a woman I hadn't vacated for. What about the landlord? Chloe asked, picking at her potatoes. I thought the lease had another year. What if they don't want to sell? Mrs. Pembroke laughed, a dry, rasping sound. Everyone has a price, darling. James said the owner is some faceless corporation. Kensington Holdings, wasn't it? They won't care who lives here as long as the cheque clears. We just need to make sure the property is vacant. We can't have baggage cluttering up the place when Tiffany moves in. Baggage. That was me. I was the baggage. I have the papers ready, James said, wiping grease from his lip. I'm going to give them to her this week. A clean break, no alimony, no division of assets. Will she sign? Chloe asked, looking over at me for a split second before returning to her plate. She might get a lawyer. With what money? James scoffed. She hasn't worked in 3 years. Her family is nobody. She has nowhere to go and no one to turn to. She will sign because she is weak. She will sign because she still thinks I am the prize. He looked at his mother and winked. Besides, I will tell her I need to be free to find myself. I won't mention Tiffany until the ink is dry. She is gullible enough to believe it. I stood there, feeling a coldness spread through my veins that had nothing to do with the winter draft. It was the chill of absolute clarity. I looked at James, the man I had vowed to love and cherish. He wasn't just falling out of love with me. He was actively strategizing how to discard me with the least amount of financial loss. He was calculating my heartbreak like it was a tax deduction. I walked over to the table to refill his glass. More wine, James? I asked softly. He didn't look up. He just held out his glass. About time, Sarah. You are hovering like a ghost. It is unnerving. I poured the red liquid. I watched it swirl in the crystal. I had a sudden violent urge to smash the bottle over his head, to scream that I was Kensington Holdings, to tell them that the only person getting evicted was them. But I didn't. I poured the wine. I stepped back into the shadows. Let them plan. Let them dream of their spring wedding and their free mansion. Let them believe they are the predators at this table. They don't realise that they are the ones trapped in the cage, and I am the one holding the key. Do you want to see the look on James's face when he realises who he was really talking about? If you are ready for the trap to snap shut, comment the number 2 below. These end of a marriage does not sound like a crash. It sounds like the slide of paper across a mahogany table. It was Tuesday evening. The heating was off because James said we needed to economise to save for the house purchase. I was wearing 2 jumpers, sitting by the cold fireplace when he walked in. He did not take off his coat. He did not ask how my day was. He simply placed a thick blue folder in front of me. It is time, Sarah, he said. His voice was devoid of emotion, like he was ordering a coffee. I looked at the folder. I knew what was inside. The clean break order. Now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It is 2 weeks before Christmas, James. He sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of exaggerated frustration. Don't start with the sentimental rubbish, he snapped. Christmas is just a day. This is about our future. Well, my future. I need this done before the new year. I need to be free of encumbrances. Encumbrances. That is what he called me. Not his wife, not his partner. An encumbrance. A piece of luggage that was too heavy to carry onto the first-class flight he thought he was boarding. He pulled out a chair and sat opposite me. He looked at me with a cold, clinical detachment. "Look at it this way, Sarah," he said, leaning in. "I'm doing you a favour. You don't fit in this world. You never have. You try, I will give you that, but you are just plain. You are a small life, Sarah, and I am meant for big things." He pointed at the document. "I have been generous," he lied. "I am letting you keep your personal effects, your clothes, your books. That is more than fair, considering you have contributed absolutely zero to this household financially. I have paid for the food you eat, the roof over your head, the heat you are wasting right now." I looked at him. I looked at the man who was wearing a watch I bought, standing on a floor I paid for, in a house I owned. The audacity was so breathtaking, it was almost impressive. "Zero," I repeated. "I have cooked every meal. I have cleaned every room. I have managed your life, James." "That is unskilled labour, Sarah," he sneered. "I can hire a maid for £10 an hour to do what you do, probably better. You are a burden, you are dead weight, and I am tired of dragging you along." Dead weight. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet click of a lock turning. The final tumbler falling into place. I reached for the pen. It was a Mont Blanc. My father gave it to me when I graduated. James had borrowed it months ago and never returned it. I held the pen over the signature line. My hand did not shake. "James," I said, looking him directly in the eyes. "I want to ask you one question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer." He rolled his eyes. "Get on with it." "Are you sure?" I asked. "Are you absolutely 100% sure that this is what you want? That you want me to leave? That you want to cut all ties right here, right now? No regrets?" He laughed. It was a cruel, barking laugh. "Regrets?" he scoffed. "My only regret is that I didn't do this 3 years ago. Sign the damn papers, Sarah. Let me be happy." I nodded slowly. "Very well," I said. "Be happy, James." I pressed the nib to the paper. The ink flowed black and permanent. I signed my name. Sarah Elizabeth Pembroke. I closed the folder and pushed it back to him. "Done," I said. He grabbed the folder like a starving man grabbing bread. He checked the signature, a smug smile spreading across his face. "Finally," he breathed. "I will take this to the solicitor in the morning. You should probably start packing. I want you out by tomorrow night." He stood up and walked out of the room, whistling. He was whistling. I sat there in the cold silence. He thought I had just signed my surrender. He did not realize I had just signed his death warrant. He wanted me to be a stranger. Fine. As of this moment, I am no longer his wife. I am simply the landlord. And I have a strict policy against non-paying tenants. The ink on the divorce papers was barely dry when the phone rang. It was a shrill, demanding sound that cut through the silence of the breakfast table. James answered it on the second ring. He put on his best telephone voice, the one he uses for clients, deep, professional, and entirely fake. "James Pembroke speaking. Ah, Mr. Sterling, good morning." I watched him from the kitchen counter where I was buttering toast. I saw the colour drain from his face. I saw his knuckles turn white as he gripped the receiver. "Tonight," he stammered. But we thought, surely a standard inspection isn't necessary. We are looking to buy, after all." He listened for a moment, then swallowed hard. "I see. Yes, of course. We will be ready. 6 o'clock. Understood." He hung up the phone and looked at his mother. Panic, sheer and unadulterated, was written all over his face. "The landlord is coming," he whispered. Mrs. Pembroke dropped her teaspoon. It clattered loudly against the china saucer. "What? The corporation?" "No," James said, his voice trembling. "The actual owner. Mr. Sterling said the owner wants to inspect the property personally before accepting our offer. Apparently, they are very particular about the condition of the house. If they see one scratch, one stain, they might refuse to sell. Or worse, they might sue for damages." Mrs. Pembroke stood up, knocking her chair back. "Oh my God," she gasped. "The wine stain on the rug, the chip in the hallway paint, the state of the guest bathroom. James, if we lose this house, Tiffany's father will withdraw the offer. We will be on the street." She spun around, her eyes locking onto me like a predator spotting prey. "Sarah," she screamed, "don't just stand there eating toast. We have work to do." "I thought I was supposed to be packing," I said calmly, taking a bite of my toast. "You wanted me out, remember?" "Forget packing," she shrieked. "You can pack later. Right now, we need this house to look like a palace. If you want a reference for your next rental, which God knows you will need, you will help us clean, every inch, top to bottom." And so the great masquerade began. It was a scene of manic hilarity. James was running around hiding his clutter, shoving piles of unpaid bills into drawers. Chloe was trying to hide the cigarette burns on the curtains with strategically placed cushions. Mrs. Pembroke was shouting orders like a general in a losing war. And I was the foot soldier. They handed me a bucket of bleach, a toothbrush, and a pile of rags. "Scrub the grout in the master bathroom," James ordered. "It looks grey. It needs to be white." I knelt on the cold tiles. I dipped the toothbrush into the bleach, and I began to scrub. The irony was so thick it was almost suffocating. I was scrubbing the floor of my own house. I was polishing the chrome taps that I had picked out from a catalogue in Milan 3 years ago. I was preparing the stage for my own entrance. I worked through the afternoon and into the evening. My hands were raw, my back ached, but I didn't stop. I cleaned with a fervour that they mistook for fear. They thought I was terrified of their disapproval. They didn't know I was simply holding myself to my own high standards. I wanted the house to be perfect, not for them, but for me. When I kick them out tonight, I want to be able to enjoy a clean home. At 5:30, the house was sparkling. The air smelled of lemon and desperation. Mrs. Pembroke emerged from her room, dressed in her best pearls and a tweed suit that she thought made her look like the landed gentry. "Well," she sniffed, running a finger along the mantelpiece, "it is acceptable. Barely." She looked at me. I was wearing my old cleaning clothes, my hair tied back in a messy bun, smelling of chemicals. "Now, Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "go to the kitchen. Stay there. Do not come out. The owner is a person of importance. We cannot have someone like you spoiling the aesthetic. If Mr. Sterling asks, you are the help. Do you understand?" "I understand perfectly, madam," I said. "Good," James added, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "And try to be invisible. Just disappear." I walked into the kitchen. The heavy door swung shut behind me. I stood in the silence of the stainless steel room. I looked at the clock on the oven. 5:55. I walked over to the back closet where I kept my secret stash. Not cleaning supplies, but a garment bag. I unzipped it. Inside was a black tailored suit from Savile Row, a pair of red-soled Louboutins, and a diamond necklace that had belonged to my grandmother. "Disappear," I whispered to the empty room. I began to undress. Oh no, James, I am not going to disappear. I am about to become the only thing you can see. The clock ticked. 5:58. It is showtime. Do you want to see their faces when the help walks out as the boss? Comment yes if you are ready for the reveal. The door to the pantry clicked shut. I turned the lock. For a moment, I just stood there in the narrow darkness, listening to the muffled sounds of panic from the hallway. I could hear Mrs. Pembroke screeching about a speck of dust on the skirting board. I could hear James pacing back and forth, rehearsing his lines for the landlord. "We are delighted to welcome you to our humble home," he was muttering to himself. Humble, what a joke. I reached for the garment bag hanging behind the winter coats. The zip made a long, satisfying hiss as I pulled it down. It was time to shed the skin of the servant. I peeled off the grey cleaning tabard. It smelled of bleach and lemon floor polish. It smelled of 3 years of silence. I dropped it onto the floor. I did not fold it. I let it lie there in a crumpled heap, exactly where it belonged. Next I removed the hair tie. My hair fell loose around my shoulders. I shook it out, running my fingers through the strands, feeling the tension headache begin to fade. Then I reached into the bag. The fabric was cool to the touch. Super 150s wool, woven in Huddersfield, cut on Savile Row. I stepped into the trousers. They fit perfectly, tailored to within a millimetre of my waist. No more baggy sweatpants, no more hiding my silhouette. I buttoned the crisp white shirt. Each button felt like I was sealing away a piece of the past. The top button, the cuffs, snap, snap. Then came the jacket, a tuxedo-style blazer with satin lapels. Sharp enough to cut glass, heavy enough to remind me of who I am. I looked at my reflection in the small mirror on the back of the door. The woman staring back was not Sarah the housewife. She was not Sarah the charity case. This was Sarah Kensington. But the armour was not complete without the weapon. I opened a small velvet box I had hidden inside the pocket. A diamond choker. It wasn't gaudy, like the costume jewellery Mrs. Pembroke wore. These were flawless stones, inherited from my grandmother, a woman who built half of Mayfair with nothing but grit and a terrifying intellect. I fastened the clasp around my neck. The diamonds felt cold against my skin. They felt heavy. They felt like power. I applied a coat of lipstick, a deep blood red, war paint. Finally, the shoes. Christian Louboutin, 4-inch stilettos with the signature red sole. I stepped into them. I felt my posture change immediately. My spine straightened, my chin lifted. I was 2 inches taller than James now. I took a deep breath. For 3 years, I had made myself small so they could feel big. I had dimmed my light so they wouldn't be blinded. I had played the role of the invisible wife so well that I had almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen. But tonight, the curtain rises. Ding dong! The doorbell rang. It echoed through the house like a gong, signalling the start of a duel. I heard the frantic footsteps in the hallway. "He is here! He is here!" Mrs. Pembroke shrieked. "Everyone, places, smiles! Where is that useless girl? Sarah! Stay in the kitchen!" I smiled at my reflection. "Don't worry, Mother," I whispered to the mirror. "I am not going anywhere." I placed my hand on the door handle. My pulse was steady. My hands were dry. I am not the help. I am the executioner, and I am ready to swing the axe. The heavy oak door swung open with a groan that seemed to protest the arrival of Judgment Day. A gust of icy wind swept into the hallway, carrying snowflakes that melted instantly on the warm limestone floor. Standing on the threshold was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. He wore a charcoal overcoat, a bowler hat, and carried a leather briefcase that looked old enough to contain state secrets. Mr. Sterling, my father's most trusted advisor. A man who smiled once in 1998 and hasn't felt the need to do so since. "Good evening," Sterling said, his voice deep and dry as old parchment. James practically lunged forward to shake his hand. "Mr. Sterling, welcome, welcome. Please come in out of the cold. Here, let me take your coat." James was sweating. I could see the beads of perspiration on his upper lip, despite the freezing draft. He was trying too hard. His smile was too wide, his laugh too loud. "We are so honoured to finally meet the representative of the owner," Mrs. Pembroke chimed in, performing a clumsy little curtsy that made her look ridiculous. "Please, do admire the hallway. We have kept the original Victorian tiles in pristine condition. We treat this house as if it were our own flesh and blood." Sterling stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. He did not look at James. He did not look at Mrs. Pembroke. He looked at the walls. He looked at the chandelier. He looked at the vase of fresh lilies on the console table, lilies I had arranged 10 minutes ago. "The tiles were restored 3 years ago," Sterling said, unbuttoning his coat, "by Italian artisans at considerable expense." "Yes, well," James stammered, "we have maintained them beautifully. As you can see, we are the perfect tenants and the perfect buyers." "We are ready to sign the papers tonight," Chloe added, leaning against the banister and trying to look seductive. "My father-in-law, well, my brother's future father-in-law, is wiring the funds as we speak. £5 million. Cash." Sterling paused. He looked at Chloe with an expression of mild distaste, as if she were a smudge on a window pane. "The property is not currently listed for sale, Miss Pembroke," Sterling said. "As I explained on the telephone, this is an inspection. The owner wishes to view the premises before making any decisions regarding the future of the lease." "The owner?" Mrs. Pembroke looked around nervously. "Is he in the car? Should we prepare tea?" "The owner is already on the premises," Sterling said cryptically. James laughed nervously. "Already here? You must be joking, unless they are hiding in the cloakroom." Sterling did not laugh. He checked his pocket watch. "She is never late." At that moment, a sound cut through the nervous chatter. Click, clack, click, clack. It was the sound of stilettos hitting the hardwood floor. Slow, deliberate, rhythmically terrifying. James froze. He recognized the direction of the sound. It was coming from the kitchen corridor. He spun around, his face twisting into a mask of fury. He thought I had disobeyed him. He thought I was coming out in my cleaning rags to humiliate him in front of the VIP guest. "Sarah," he roared, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "I told you to stay in the kitchen. Get back in there. We have guests. You are embarrassing us." Mrs. Pembroke gasped. "Oh, for heaven's sake, get that girl out of sight. She looks like a—" Her voice trailed off. Because I stepped out of the shadows and into the light of the crystal chandelier. I was not wearing the grey tabard. I was wearing the black Savile Row tuxedo suit. The diamond choker at my throat caught the light and scattered it into 1,000 rainbows across the room. My hair was loose, cascading over my shoulders. My red lips were curved into a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I stood there, taller than I had ever been, looking down at them. James's mouth fell open. He looked from my shoes to my face, his brain struggling to process the image. "Sarah," he whispered, "where did you get... Why are you wearing..." He didn't finish the sentence. Because Mr. Sterling, the man who never bowed to anyone, stepped past James as if he were invisible. Sterling walked up to me. He stopped 3 feet away. He removed his hat and placed it over his heart. He bowed, a deep, respectful bow reserved for royalty. "Good evening, Madam Chairwoman," Sterling said, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "I trust the inspection is to your satisfaction." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. James looked at Sterling, then he looked at me. The colour drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. "Madam Chairwoman?" James choked out. I looked at my husband. I looked at the man who had called me a burden, a charity case, a dead weight. "Hello, James," I said, my voice smooth as velvet and cold as ice. "You can close your mouth now. You look like a fish." This is the moment. The trap has snapped shut. Do you want to see James fall to his knees? Hit the like button if you are screaming at your screen right now. Have you ever watched a building collapse in slow motion? It starts with a shudder, a structural failure deep within the foundation. Then cracks appear on the surface, and finally, the whole thing comes crashing down in a cloud of dust. That is exactly what happened to James Pembroke's face. First, the confusion. His eyebrows knitted together, trying to reconcile the image of his servant wife with the woman in the Savile Row suit standing before him. Then, the realization. The blood drained from his cheeks so completely that his skin turned the colour of old parchment. His mouth opened and closed, soundless, like a fish gasping on a riverbank. I did not wait for him to speak. I did not wait for any of them. I walked past Mrs. Pembroke. She shrank back against the wall, clutching her fake pearls, as if my very presence was radioactive. I could smell her fear. It smelled like stale perfume and sweat. I walked to the centre of the room, to the large velvet wingback chair by the fireplace. The chair that Mrs. Pembroke had declared was off limits to me because my clothes were too cheap to touch the fabric. I sat down. I crossed my legs, the red soles of my Louboutins flashing like a warning sign. I rested my hands on the armrests and looked at them. "Sterling," I said quietly. "The portfolio, please." "Certainly, madam." Sterling opened his leather briefcase and placed a heavy bound document on my lap. The cover was embossed with gold letters, Kensington Holdings. "James," I said, "sit down. You are cluttering the view." James did not sit. His legs gave way. He collapsed onto the ottoman, staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. I don't understand," he stammered. "Kensington Holdings? You? But your father was a librarian. You told me he was a librarian." I laughed. It was a soft, dark sound. My father loved books, yes, but his name was Edward Kensington, the man who built half of the London skyline, the man who owned the land this very house stands on before your grandfather was even born. Mrs. Pembroke let out a strangled squeak. "Edward Kensington? The billionaire? But you scrubbed my floors. You washed my underwear." "I did," I replied, my voice hard as diamonds, "because I wanted to know who you really were. And you showed me. You showed me every single day." I opened the portfolio. I ran my finger down the deed. "You see, When we met, James, I was looking for something money cannot buy. I was looking for decency. I was looking for a man who would love Sarah the person, not Sarah the checkbook. So I created a test. I bought this house through my holding company 3 years ago. I set the rent at a rate I knew you could barely afford, to see if you would work hard for our future. I let you treat me like a maid, to see if you had any kindness in your soul. I looked at Chloe. She was trembling, her phone still in her hand, but she had stopped recording. And you, Chloe, you mocked my clothes. You stole my creams. You called me poor. Do you know why I never bought new clothes? Because I didn't need to impress you. My wardrobe is in storage in Knightsbridge. It is worth more than your entire life's earnings. I turned back to James. He looked like he was going to be sick. You wanted to buy this house, James. You wanted to use Tiffany's money to buy my own property from me. I didn't know, James whispered, tears forming in his eyes. Sarah, please, baby, it was all a mistake. I was stressed. I love you. You know I love you. Stop, I commanded. The single word cracked like a whip. You don't love me. You love the idea of a rich wife. And the tragedy is, James, you had one. You had the richest wife in London, sleeping in your bed every night, and you treated her like garbage. I stood up. I walked over to James. I leaned down until my face was inches from his. I could see the terror in his pupils. You kept saying you wanted to meet the landlord. You were so desperate to impress the owner. Well, here I am. I gestured to the room, to the walls, to the ceiling. I am the landlord. I've been here, cooking your meals, cleaning your mess, and listening to your insults for the past 3 years. I have heard every word. I have seen every sneer, and I have kept the receipts. I pulled the black notebook from my pocket, the ledger. I tossed it onto his lap. Open it, I said. He opened the book with shaking hands. He saw the dates, the amounts, the insults recorded in my neat handwriting. What is this? He choked out. That is your bill, I said coldly, and tonight I am calling in the debt. Sterling stepped forward, holding a document. Mr. Pembroke, Sterling said, you are in breach of your tenancy agreement on multiple counts. Subletting without permission, damage to property, and most importantly, failure to pay rent. But I paid, James protested. I paid into the account every month. You paid into a joint account, I corrected him, an account that I have access to, an account that you drained last week to buy an engagement ring for Tiffany. James went pale. I saw the transaction, James. Harry Winston, 2 carats. Very tacky. I straightened up and looked at the 3 of them. They looked small. They looked pathetic. The illusion of their superiority had shattered completely. Mr. Sterling, I said, turning my back on them, please proceed with the eviction immediately. Wait! Mrs. Pembroke screamed, lunging forward. You can't do this. We are family. I turned back one last time. Family? I asked. No, madam. You fired me from the family this morning, remember? I am just the landlord now, and my property is currently infested with vermin. You can tell a lot about a person by how they react when their bank account is threatened. When I revealed my identity, they were shocked. But when Sterling opened the second file, the financial file, shock turned into visceral, animalistic terror. The room was silent, save for the crackling of the fire. I picked up the black notebook again, my ledger. But this time, I wasn't writing in it. I was reading from it. Let us begin with the basics, I said, my voice calm and methodical. The matter of rent. James tried to stand up, his legs shaking. I told you I paid rent, £2,000 a month into the joint account. Sit down, James, I said, not even looking up, and listen. He sat. You paid £2,000 a month into an account named Pembroke Joint Savings. You believed this money was going towards a future mortgage. In reality, under the terms of the lease which you signed, but clearly never read, that money was a security deposit against the eventual purchase of the property. A purchase that is now void. I turned a page. However, let us look at the withdrawals from that account in the last 6 months. I read from the bank statement Sterling had handed me. August 15th, £300, the Connaught Bar. September 2nd, £500, Harrods Menswear. October 10th, £1,000, weekend break to Paris, Hotel Georges the Vanque. I looked up at him. I checked my passport, James. I wasn't in Paris in October. Who was? James turned a shade of grey that matched the walls. He didn't answer. Tiffany, I answered for him. You used the rent money that was technically contractually owed to Kensington Holdings, to fund your affair. That is not just a breach of contract, James. That is theft. You have effectively been squatting in a £5 million property for 6 months. Sterling cleared his throat. We calculate the arrears, with interest and penalties, to be £18,000, payable immediately. I don't have £18,000, James whispered. I know, I said, because you spent it on champagne and a woman who spells great with a great. But we are just getting started. I turned my attention to Chloe. She was trying to make herself small in the corner, hiding behind a velvet cushion. Chloe, I said. She flinched. Being a lifestyle influencer is expensive when you don't actually have any influence, isn't it? I gestured to the heavy silk curtains framing the window. Those curtains are French silk, £200 a yard. There are 3 cigarette burns on the left panel. I assume that was from the night you hosted that little gathering while James and I were away. It was an accident, Chloe squeaked. And the red wine stain on the Persian rug in the hallway, I asked. The one you covered with a potted plant. That rug is an antique. Professional restoration will cost £4,000. Sterling made a note on his clipboard. Scratch, scratch. The sound was deafening. Total dilapidations caused by Miss Chloe Pembroke, Sterling announced, estimated at £7,500. You are crazy, Chloe screamed, tears streaming down her face. I can't pay that. I work at a boutique part-time. Then perhaps you should sell some of your handbags, I suggested coldly. Or ask your brother. Oh, wait, he is broke too. I closed the notebook. The heavy thud echoed in the room. Now for the finale. I looked at James. This was the moment, the kill shot. You see, James, being the owner of Kensington Holdings means I have a very diverse portfolio. I don't just own houses. I own commercial buildings. I own office blocks, including the glass tower at Canary Wharf, where your architecture firm rents its headquarters. James looked up, his eyes widening. He started to shake his head. No, no. Yes, I smiled. I am your firm's landlord too. And because I am a diligent landlord, I recently commissioned a forensic audit of the building's service charges and renovation budgets, specifically the budgets for the projects you manage. I pulled a single sheet of paper from the file. Project Skyline. You were the lead architect. You authorised the purchase of Italian marble for the lobby. But the marble installed wasn't Italian, was it, James? It was cheap synthetic stone from a supplier in Essex. James was hyperventilating now. He was clawing at his collar, gasping for air. The difference in cost was £50,000, I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. £50,000 that vanished. Funny enough, that is the exact amount you deposited into a private offshore account in the Caymans 3 days later. The room spun. I saw Mrs. Pembroke grabbed her chest. I saw Chloe cover her mouth. That is embezzlement, James. That is fraud. And since Kensington Holdings is the client you defrauded, I am the one who decides whether to handle this civilly or criminally. Sterling stepped forward. We have drafted the affidavit for the Crown Prosecution Service. If this goes to court, you are looking at 5 to 7 years in prison, minimum. James slid off the ottoman. He fell to his knees. He crawled towards me across the floor, his expensive suit dragging on the carpet. "Sarah," he sobbed, grabbing the hem of my trousers. I stepped back, disgusted. "Sarah, please, don't send me to prison. I'll do anything. I'll pay it back. I'll work. Just don't call the police." I looked down at him, the man who had sneered at me yesterday, the man who had called me dead weight. He was a weeping mess at my feet. "Pay it back?" I asked. "With what? You have no house, you have no savings, and as of 10 minutes ago, when I emailed the senior partners at your firm, you have no job." You fired me," he gasped. "Technically, I just forwarded the audit results," I said, examining my fingernails. "They fired you. I imagine security is clearing out your desk right now." I looked at Mrs. Pembroke. She was slumped against the wall, weeping silently. "You wanted a wealthy daughter-in-law, madam?" I asked. "Well, you had one, but you were too busy looking down your nose to notice. And now your son is not just divorced, he is a criminal." I turned to Sterling. "The police are on their way to take a statement regarding the fraud, but I want them out of my house before the officers arrive. I don't want a crime scene tape on my front door. It looks tacky." "Understood, madam," Sterling said. I looked at James, still sobbing on the floor. "You have 5 minutes to leave," I said. "If you are still here when the clock strikes, I will let the police arrest you inside, and I will make sure the neighbours are watching. The power shift is complete. The king is dead. Long live the queen." Do you think Sarah went too far, or did James deserve it? Comment the number 3 if you think this is justice served. Barking to 5 is not a long time. It is enough to boil an egg. It is enough to listen to a pop song. But it is not enough to pack up a life of deception. When the grandfather clock in the hallway struck the hour, the heavy thud of the pendulum sounded like a gavel hitting a judge's bench. "Time is up," I said. I nodded to Sterling. He opened the front door. But it wasn't the police who walked in, not yet. It was my private security team, 4 men, broad shoulders, black suits, earpieces. They didn't look like bouncers, they looked like machines designed to remove problems, and right now the Pembrokes were the problem. "Remove the trespassers," I ordered, "and ensure nothing leaves this house that belongs to Kensington Holdings." Pandemonium broke out. Mrs. Pembroke tried to run for the stairs, presumably to grab her jewellery box. A security guard blocked her path with the immovability of a brick wall. "Madam, please step towards the exit," he said, his voice flat. "Get your hands off me," she screeched, flailing her arms. "I need my things. I need my coat. It is freezing outside." She grabbed a long mink coat from the rack near the door. It was a coat she wore to the opera, a coat she stroked like a pet. "Stop," I said. The guard held her arm. "That coat," I said, walking over to her. "James bought it for you last Christmas, didn't he?" Yes, it is a gift. It is mine. He bought it using the company credit card, I corrected her. Technically, that is corporate embezzlement, which makes this coat stolen property. Evidence. I reached out and took the coat from her trembling hands. The silk lining slipped through her fingers. You can't send me out there in just a dress, she wailed. I'll freeze. Then walk fast, I replied. The friction generates heat. I tossed the coat to Sterling. Add it to the inventory. Next was Chloe. She was trying to sneak out the side door, clutching her Louis Vuitton tote bag against her chest like a shield. Check the bag, I ordered. 2 guards intercepted her. She screamed as they gently but firmly pried the bag from her grip. They turned it upside down on the hallway table. It wasn't just lipstick and phone chargers that fell out. Silver spoons, a crystal paperweight, and a small framed painting from the guest bedroom. Petty theft, I sighed, shaking my head. Really, Chloe? Stealing the silverware? How cliché. I didn't steal it, she sobbed, mascara running down her face in black rivulets. I was just borrowing it for safekeeping. Get her out, I said, turning away, and keep the bag. It was bought with my rent money. Finally, there was James. He hadn't moved. He was still on his knees on the Persian rug, the same rug his mother had yelled at me for cleaning with a machine. He looked up at me. His eyes were red, swollen, and filled with a desperate, pathetic hope. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of car keys, the Range Rover. Sarah, he whispered, please, let me take the car, just the car. I can sleep in it. I have nowhere else to go. Mother can't walk in the snow. I looked at the key fob. It had the Kensington Holdings logo embossed on the leather. That car is a company vehicle, James, I said softly. It is insured for authorised employees only, and as we established, you no longer work for the firm. I'm begging you, he cried, grabbing my ankle again. Sarah, look at me. It's James, your husband. We shared a bed. We shared a life. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I looked down at him. I really looked at him. I searched for the man I met in the pub 3 years ago. I searched for the man who had offered me his jacket in the rain. I searched for a single spark of love or pity in my own heart. But there was nothing. It was like looking at a stranger. No, less than a stranger. A stranger deserves common courtesy. This man was a parasite that I had finally pulled out of my skin. It meant everything to me, James, I said. That is why this has to happen, because you took that meaning and you sold it for a cheap thrill and a fake reputation. I held out my hand. The keys, now. He dropped the keys into my palm. His hand brushed mine. His skin was clammy. Mine was dry. Escort Mr. Pembroke to the pavement, I said to the head of security. 2 guards hoisted him up by his armpits, his legs dragged uselessly behind him. He wasn't fighting anymore. He was broken. Sarah, Mrs. Pembroke screamed from the doorway as she was shoved out. You will burn in hell for this, you witch! I am already in hell, Mother, I called back. I lived with you for 3 years. The guards marched them out. James, Chloe, Mrs. Pembroke. They stumbled out onto the front steps. The wind hit them instantly. I could see the snow swirling around them, sticking to their expensive hair, biting into their exposed skin. They looked back at the warm, glowing hallway. They looked at me, standing in my tuxedo, framed by the golden light of the chandelier. I walked to the door. James reached out a hand. Sarah. I grabbed the heavy brass handle. Goodbye, James. I slammed the door. The sound was final, absolute. It echoed through the house, vibrating in the floorboards. Click. I turned the deadbolt. Click. I engaged the security chain. Silence rushed back into the room, filling the space where their chaos used to be. It was done. The parasites were gone. The infection was cleared. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door and listened. I could hear faint shouting from the street. I could hear the wind howling. But in here it was warm. In here it was quiet. In here it was finally mine. Silence. It is a heavy velvet thing. Most people are afraid of it. They fill it with noise, with chatter, with people who do not matter. They think silence means loneliness. But tonight, silence sounds like a symphony. I walked over to the sideboard. My heels made no sound on the thick Persian rug. It was just me and the crackling of the logs in the fireplace. I reached for the bottle of Chateau Petrus 1989. I had been saving it for a special occasion, a wedding anniversary perhaps, or a christening. But I suppose a successful eviction is as good an occasion as any. The cork popped with a soft, satisfying sigh. I poured the dark crimson liquid into a crystal goblet. The wine breathed, releasing aromas of black cherry and truffle into the warm air. There was one loose thread left, one final act of, let us call it, corporate responsibility. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I scrolled past the missed calls from James, 7 of them already, and found a number I had saved long ago. Sir Richard, Tiffany's father. I pressed call. It rang twice. "Kensington?" a gruff voice answered. "Is that you? It is late." "Hello, Richard," I said, taking a sip of the wine. It tasted divine. "I apologize for the hour. I am calling as a professional courtesy, one CEO to another." "What is it? Is the merger in trouble?" "No, Richard. Business is booming. This is a personal matter, regarding your daughter, Tiffany, and her fiancé, James Pembroke." I paused. I could hear Richard shifting on the line. "What about him?" "I just finished an audit of my architecture firm," I said, examining the legs of the wine in the glass. "Mr. Pembroke has been terminated for gross financial misconduct, embezzlement to be precise. He is also currently homeless, having been evicted from my property tonight for insolvency." There was a silence on the other end, a stunned, angry silence. "Embezzlement," Richard roared. "And he wanted to marry my Tiffany. He asked for a dowry to buy a house." "He was trying to buy my house, Richard, with your money." "That bastard. I will kill him. I will cut him off before he gets within 10 miles of my daughter." "I thought you would want to know," I said softly. "Protect your assets, Richard. Good night." I hung up. The screen went black. The last bridge was burned. James has no wife, no home, no job, and now no golden parachute. I walked over to the wing-back chair, my chair, and sat down. The firelight danced on the walls, casting long, flickering shadows. People say a woman without a husband is incomplete. They say a big house needs a large family to fill it. They say a woman in her 30s shouldn't be alone on a winter's night. But looking around this magnificent room, stripped of their clutter, stripped of their lies, and stripped of their noise, I have never felt more whole. I am not just a survivor. I am the architect of my own salvation. I raised my glass to the empty room, to the silence, to the cold wind outside that can no longer touch me. "To the landlord," I whispered. I took a drink, and for the first time in 3 years, I smiled. A real smile.